Hello and welcome to the Sohbet Punx Podcast.
There you go.
This is episode 70. This is the podcast in which two punks talk about meaning, transcendence, awe, and spirituality with a small s.
There you go.
We have reduced the number of things that we talk about.
We've reduced it back to the original 3 because you got carried away and that list of fun, transcendence, awe, wonder, art, life, joy, fun, candy, sherbet, sweets just turned into everything.
Actually, well, you say, I mean, it's specifically not about candy, sherbet, or sweets.
It was because it could have been by a few more episodes down the line. You could have added all sorts to that.
But depending on how this episode goes, it may be that it becomes clear that reducing the amount of wonder that you attempt to put out there into the world is actually a positive thing and creates more wonder.
What?
Well, we'll discuss it later.
You're going to blame my mind.
We'll discuss it later. I'm not really sure that's how this episode is going to go, if we're honest. As you may have noticed, we've changed the title of the podcast again.
Why not?
We did discuss this slightly last episode.
We did.
If you haven't listened to that, go back.
Mm-hmm.
Why are we changing the title again, Siobhan?
Because it turns out Sohbet is, whilst we stumbled upon this word in a book from a mystic,
very obscure,
and it felt really obscure, and it was like, oh my gosh, Sohbet means spiritual conversations amongst friends. We were like, that's perfect, we're going to use that, and that is such a random word that clearly it'll be brilliant.
No one will even know what it means, thought us.
And then we named it that, and quite immediately one of my friends messaged me going, why have you called it Sohbet? And I was like, oh, because of this lovely meaning. She was like, it's just the word for conversation in Arabic. And you're like, oh yeah, there's gonna be fucking tons of podcasts called that. And then lo and behold, there are tons of podcasts called the Sohbet Podcast or Sohbet Podcast. So if you were listening to this and you fancied sharing it with your friends, and you fancied not just sending them a link online, but just, because you're talking to them face to face, and you're saying, God, there's this podcast that I listen to, you should listen to it. It's called the Sohbet Podcast. They'll never find us. They'll just literally never find us. So we, harking back to the Breakfast Punx days, added Punx spelt with an X.
Which is probably just going to confuse everyone as well, because people are going to type in Sohbet Punx spelt correctly. So we might have been foolish again.
Making a massive assumption that anyone's typing this in anywhere. Someone will be.
Yeah.
One day.
Why not?
I
think the point is not that we expect millions of people to search for us. The point is that if one person wanted to search for us prior to this week, they wouldn't have been able to find us.
Exactly that. But now, that's the rename. That's why.
And of course, we're cool dudes too.
Cool dudes.
In the 90s, it used to be very cool to spell punks with an X.
Was it?
I don't know actually if it was cool.
I've never seen it prior to you.
Oh, are you kidding? All members, sure. I think one of the members of Rancid has got punks with an X tattooed on his forehead. I think.
Well, God, they're cool. Cool dudes. I mean, Rancid are.
You used to put X on the end of all sorts of different things. I found out. I think we discussed Corey Feldman not very long ago. I'm going to discuss Corey Feldman again. Corey Feldman still writes on his. A friend of mine sent something he'd posted on his Instagram or something, and it was a very long diatribe that he'd added to.
He's never stopped doing well.
And he still uses that sort of all of those abbreviations that you used to use to keep your text message characters down to enough to fit into one.
LUVU.
Yeah, and like the number 2 instead of 2, and the letter U instead of U. I mean, he doesn't use any of the sort of really creative ones, just the really like bog standard old ones that you used on your little Samsung with, was it Worm or Snake, or what was the game?
Little Nokia 3310.
Oh yeah, whatever that is.
Bringing them back.
Oh yeah, not Samsung, Nokia.
I don't know. They all exist, Dave. Who knows?
They all exist. Or do they? Does anything exist?
Oh, don't start that.
Anyway, Corey Feldman still writes like that.
I'm not surprised. I'm not sure he's progressed since the 2000s.
Well, I don't think he's progressed since the 80s, so that doesn't explain this at all. I mean, he's quite famously someone who hasn't progressed since the 80s.
And I don't know whether this is real. Again, this is the problem with the internet. But I don't know how recent it is, but there's a video that's been going around of him doing a guitar solo in I'm Gonna guess he got to guest with someone like not Linkin Park.
That sounds
Limp
unlikely.
Bizkit.
That sounds
No.
unlikely.
This all sounds horribly unlikely, but there's a video of him like shredding on a guitar, and he's like got his tongue out and he's like really trying. But if you look at him, you think, oh yeah, he's really doing something. But if you turn the sound on, it's just him hammering. It sounds dreadful.
What?
He's come out and he's with a band. I can't think what band he is. He's just guesting.
But that means that they're mocking him, though. They've said, "Come on, Corey Feldman.
Yeah, but
come out onto stage,
no
make a
irony.
racket with that guitar. You're great on that guitar." And then everyone's just pointing and laughing at him again.
It feels sad, but he doesn't. I mean, if it makes you feel any better, he has no idea.
No, of course he has no idea. But
no
I don't know. Well, maybe that's better.
I don't know. If he's there thinking, "Fuck yeah, all these people are really vibing on my, noodling I'm doing."
He's never been known as a guitar player. I mean, he's had a long-standing music career, which I'm sure no one knows about, or most people don't know about. But he has been. What was his dog's name?
Oh, I can't remember. No, it wasn't his dog. I think it was his manager he thanked, but he called him his dog, and I just thought he was
Charles
thanking his
Peterson.
dog.
It just said thanks to all of these different people at the end, and also my dog Charles Peterson.
Yeah. He said, well, first and foremost, obviously God.
No,
so,
obviously God.
He thanks some good people.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Bless him. But Corey Feldman, he's still going.
Well, that's Corey Feldman chat for this week of Breakfast Punx. Oh my God, Sohbet Punx Podcast. This is going to get very confusing.
I'll tell you what also we haven't done. Hello. Also, my name is Siobhan.
Oh yeah, I'm Dave.
Yeah.
Did I say that my name was Dave?
No, you didn't.
And then
say
just
anything.
ignore you?
No, you just didn't say anything. Episode 70 also. I think you did say that.
I did say that.
But we definitely didn't say
I thought
our
I was
names.
doing a very professional opening.
Yeah. Well.
So, with that in mind, let's move it on to the first segment of this podcast that we always do.
The first of two.
In which we discuss things which have been brought into our lives or which we have gone out and sought and put into our lives that have created a sense of meaning, transcendence, but for the sake of argument, also fun, art and wonder.
You've got to drop them. This shopping list of things that you love. We could add love on there.
What have you done, Siobhan, over the last 2 weeks that have provided you with meaning, transcendence and awe?
Well, I have been really living my 70-year-old grandma life. Cross-stitching, baked a cake.
It was a nice cake.
It still is a nice cake, Dave. We've got so much of it to eat still.
That's all good with me.
Yeah, so much cake. But whilst I've been doing that, I've been filling my brain with podcasts, which I think is like something we always do anyway. And one that I've been more interested in of late is the Rich Roll podcast. I'm not about to bang on about how amazing he is, but it is quite a good podcast he's a very good interviewer of guests. And he's very thoughtful, and he's very, he doesn't always agree with the people, but he will immerse himself in their thing and be fully prepared when they come on and at least do really good conversations. But someone who I'd never heard of, who he talks to a couple of times on there, is someone called Arthur Brooks. He came up randomly. I just let it tittle over and just whoever came on and I didn't really pay attention.
The endless scroll.
The endless scroll of Rich Roll. But Arthur Brooks is someone I'd never come across before. He would be a peer of Mo Gorda, because we've got to throw him in every episode. I just basically talk about him all the time. And I think he actually did write a book called The Happiness Equation, which is what Mo Gorda claims to have made in his book called Soul for Happy. So it's a bit strange, and I'm sure they've come across each other. But I think Arthur Brooks is more influential and more, probably more wider known in, if anyone knows about that field, the person they might know is Arthur. He wrote a book
with Oprah Winfrey, so I think he's probably quite well known in a more mainstream context.
Definitely, and I think most certainly in America, like maybe we don't have it as
he's
much.
been on. Actually, the Oprah Winfrey show doesn't exist anymore, did it?
But he's been on. Yeah. He's been on all the shows, more so than Mo would have been.
He's basically like Dr. Phil.
Yeah, I think he kind of is that sort of. But I think he's getting to that sort of level known. So again, I didn't know who he was. Maybe people who are listening do. but I didn't know what to expect. And he's in his, I think he's 60. Oh, he's getting towards 60. And he's lived through loads of different parts of life, in that he's had loads of different jobs, loads of different careers. He was in a Washington think tank, so he was very political at one point, and then he abandoned all that to do social sciences and then cognitive sciences, and then he's just where he is now. Some of the takeaways I got from it were just really lovely things about how to be happy, and he's got tons and tons and tons of processes and little hacks you can do and all these other stuff. But he just pointed out a couple of things that made me really think, and they carried with me for the last couple of weeks. One was about he calls it, I can't remember what he calls it. One's crystallized intelligence and one's fluid intelligence. Fluid intelligence being something that you have inherently as a younger person, and he counts younger as anything up to about in your 30s, 40s. And it's about your ability to strive and want to keep pushing and actually excel at something and be good at it. But he was saying that it tails off, and it's something that scientifically happens, that you know, and you see it most in people who find their career path really early and excel at it in their like early 20s, and then all of a sudden they're in their late 30s, early 40s, getting on to 50s, and they can't compete with these younger people. And they'll say it's, you know, things have changed, things have moved on, but it's not just that. It's that your brain literally is not as flexible, cannot take on as much information like in that way, and your, what they call your fluid intelligence, diminishes. And he says there's tons of people that feel like their life is over at that point. He goes, it's something that I come across a lot, that I hear people speaking, you know, that life's not worth living. A lot of people hit this wall of, I don't know, just feeling kind of down and lost in their life.
It's the age that vast numbers of men kill themselves.
Well, I think it's unfortunately coincides with that as well, because I don't think I think this is a non-gender specific issue. But,
of course, sorry, I didn't mean to make it about men in any way. I just mean as in it's interesting.
But I mean, imagine compounding those two things together.
I'm literally 44 years old, Siobhan.
Yeah,
I know about compounding those two things together.
No. So, well, yeah, exactly that. So it's kind of, gosh, that's a really awful place to be. So what he's saying with this fluid intelligence thing, he goes, but then there's this other thing that happens when you're older, especially if you can like really dive into this side. It goes, you have this thing called crystallized intelligence, and it's the summation of everything I'm going to definitely misunderstand and misportray this, but I'm going to try and explain exactly why I thought it was interesting. It's where you've been the learner all this time and you've been excelling, and now you become the teacher. And he's saying that actually people who stay in the same job their entire life and then get burnt out and sick of it, this could be one of the factors leading to it. And he's like, because at this point you should be thinking, what else can I do that will bring me purpose and make me feel like I'm giving? And he said it's about this crystallized intelligence and this idea of use your experience and teach, or use your experience and, you know, be the wise person at work, or just be the wise person at work. That's not really what I mean to say, but it's something around maybe change. A change is good at this time, and then bringing your experience from other things to that thing in a way to learn, rather than just trying to learn a new skill and being completely down. But what I really liked about it was this idea of actually there is a scientific reason for why people feel this way around that sort of age, and the importance of finding newness from that point onwards. Because I think some people are just like, I mean, one of the critiques of the modern world that Rich Roll and Arthur were talking about was the idea of retiring. I mean, what was really interesting about this retiring thing was just like, retiring is a made up thing that came from like Germany in the 1890s, because there wasn't enough jobs, I think. So they were just like, you just need to, there wasn't enough money to keep people alive, and people were only living to like 67. So they were like, yeah, 65, stop working then. And so now everyone's become obsessed with this like retiring thing. And he's like, but people get sad. You need to have purpose for the rest of your life. And finding a way to have that isn't just sometimes sitting down and doing nothing. The follow on from that was also a really interesting point about friendship, which I think has come up from a few different people. But it's the idea of, they talked about it in terms of widows, and they talked about it. Actually, men have it way worse. Women tend to be able to keep friendships throughout their adult life, and so if they end up being widowed, they tend to be okay. I think they actually gave a kind of horribly savage statistic for like within 6 months they're kind of fine, whereas men, it's like something like 80% never recover and they're just depressed from then on, and actually not a lot, quite often don't make it past a few years. So yeah, it's just something about making sure you keep in touch with people in a very real way and having friends that are important. He calls it real friends and deal friends as well. So he's like,
deal friends being like in business, you've created people that you're using for something.
Oh yeah, not as nasty as that necessarily, but yeah, pretty much. Yeah, just
or like you're in a sports team with them, so you see them and you socialise with them, but you're not necessarily close friends.
A little bit like that, but like, what is it transactional? Is the sort of thing. So like, are you friends with them because they know, they're your link to a really good, I don't know, garage. That's a really boring thing I can think of. But I don't know. Are they? Is there a reason that you're friends with them other than you just really like them and you care about them and you love them?
Don't you think that? I mean, a vast majority of friendships, generally in the modern world, are transactional in some way.
Yeah.
And even if they're not, are they not sort of being somehow made into a transactional relationship? And I'm sorry, I'm doing it again. I'm going to bash social media again, but a lot of the interactions that you have with your friends involve them rewarding you in some way. I mean, this is the sort of famous problem with digital life.
Yeah.
Is that, not to say that you're not genuinely friends with anybody, but it turns that friendship into a transaction by way of, if I post a picture of myself, I want you to click the heart button, or I want you to say I look good or whatever. Even if those people are completely genuine friends in real life, it almost forces a degree of transaction on at least at least a section of their friendship.
And I think you're totally right. And I think there's a difference between putting something out there and randos in amongst some of them might be true friends, giving you feedback in whatever way. And there's a difference between that and, I specifically think my friend would be interested in this thing. I'm going to directly send it to them and it will start a conversation. Or maybe I'll physically show them in real life.
Yeah, no, so I don't mean to suggest that every single interaction on social media is therefore transactional. What I'm saying is that prior to the existence of social media, there is a very clear delineation between people that you're friends with because you're friends with them. Yeah. And then, like you say, I don't know why you use this example, but people that you're friends with because they know a good garage. Well,
I couldn't think of anything else. My brain just turned off.
Or like, people that you work with or whatever.
Yeah.
So there's a very clear delineation there, right? Up until, what I'm saying is, with the invention of social media, what's happened is those genuine friendships, whilst they still remain genuine friendships, and I'm not diminishing them in any way, there's a creeping sort of spawn of transactionality. Yeah. That's the word. That it kind of creeps into your genuine friendships.
Yeah, I think you're totally right. I think it's also, the friends you genuinely miss having actual conversations with are your friends, and the people who
just know a good garage.
Or that you just have this like occasional comment with online.
Yeah, of course.
It just gave me like pause for thought in that respect. It was he said, connect with someone in a real way at some point, once or twice a week, like, because if you don't, you will lose it. Like, and that's something that he's talking about adult friendship generally, who's just like, there are adults that could not count anyone as their friend, especially those who have a spouse. They're just like, their friendship group outside of that is minimal to none. And he's just like, and this is a real problem with regards to happiness, because he said you're meant to be building memories, you're meant to be building real life things with people, and if you limit your group or you have none, you're just setting yourself up to potentially be quite miserable later in life.
Well, society encourages that though as well, doesn't it? Because, so it's interesting, that the ages that that one type of intelligence turns into another type of intelligence. There seems to be a little window of time there, which is kind of, like 40s to 50s maybe. And I think society, and I don't think this is a new thing at all, I think society really does, it would be weird in a way. I think people would see you as weird if you were a 50-year-old person like just trying to make friends with another 50-year-old person. There's some sort of societal pressure which specifically says that that's a strange thing to do. And I think that probably underlying that is an expectation that you will have already made all the friends that you need by then. If you were a good person, you don't end up being 50 and not having any friends. But that's not entirely true because of the nature of life. But also, it's difficult. It's so difficult during those ages for most people to make friends because of, obviously, it's the time where you're mostly looking after your kids and, you've probably got a career and you've got lots of pressures on you outside of the last thing. We're not really expected to think about socializing during those years. That would almost be immature, maybe seen as possibly immature or again a bit weird. And so I think it just makes me think of that whole thing about suicide rates and what have you. Like it's a real awful soup of shit. It's like you hit the time in your life where if you've not become, or even if you have, I was going to say if you've not become a rock star or a huge success in business, but I mean, even if you have, probably, but if you've not done the thing that you think that you were going to do when you were 20 years old, and you've not been that successful, which by default is almost everybody, because very few people can actually be successful in the way that we allow people to be successful in them, or view people as being successful. So you hit the point in your life where you suddenly realize, shit, it's too late for me to do this now. Your body's turned into shit. You look worse than you've ever looked. Your intelligence apparently is also turning to shit. And you haven't, and the new sort of intelligence that you're going to be able to rely on later in life hasn't kicked in yet as such. I'm sure it's not as simple as that. It's a really fucking rubbish age to be, isn't it?
And just where it leads to, I mean, one thing that they then ended up talking about on the podcast was they were like, there's these things called men's sheds. And they were like, it's really taken off in Britain. And I'm like, I've actually seen one.
There's a men's shed in St. Leonard's.
Yeah.
In
Orr, yeah. And I have always looked at it fondly, been like, oh, that's nice. Like, men get together and do woodwork. And they were like, no, it is not a social, like, you look at it like it's a social engagement, but it's not. It's women dropping off their husbands or widowed husbands turning up. Daycare, where the men aren't actually encouraged to socialise with each other. It's like you're doing woodwork next to someone else who's doing woodwork. And I don't know how much communication there actually is, and what their argument was, you just don't want to be that man that's getting dropped off at the men's shit. Like, keep some real friends.
But I mean, the other thing about that is, and I'm making presumptions here because I don't know this for a fact, but I'm almost certain that the men that go to the men's sheds are like 70 plus. This isn't men in their 40s.
No, what I'm saying is, where you don't want to end up.
No, of course. But the point is there isn't, and I'm not making this a gender thing, because I think that there's definitely an overlap between genders, but I think there is, there's a difference within relationships between men.
There is. I mean, and there is a gender thing. It's like been proven time and time again in whatever studies people are doing.
Well, it's self-evident as well, isn't it? We all know men and we all know women, and we all know exactly how different friendships exist. And
100%.
And the difference in sort of emotional intelligence or capability, maybe more. And
for whatever reason, it's a lot harder for men. But something to be thinking about just generally, I thought, especially in a world where, that's age and, scientifically proven age and gender, mid to late life. But I wonder how much that's going to creep forward socially, not the intelligence bit, because I think that's pretty just a standardized, scientifically proven thing.
I think
the social media as not keeping such actual friends, and it's not about amount; it's about quality.
Of course.
But they've done studies on how count how many friends you've got.
Yeah, and they diminish for us all, I imagine, with age to some extent.
Yeah.
You all start off at school and you've got loads of friends, and then school ends, and then you sort of keep probably a decent amount of those friends, and then you slowly, you go off to university or whatever, or you, as I did, just stay where you were.
Yeah.
Don't go to university, but you go in different directions, and then you get married, and then you start jobs, and it's interesting.
But it was just stuff to think about, and just to go back to this Arthur Brooks guy, I just really found him very interesting. I've listened to 2 or 3 where he's on it now. I don't agree with absolutely everything he believes and does, but it's just super interesting. I just found him.
Is it the Catholicism that you have a problem with?
I don't have a problem with it. I just obviously don't share his belief, and he's very devout and very interested in it. But I would say he is also super interested in all religion and all spirituality, and he's one of these people that he's just like, whatever works for you. But just to go back to it, he is a strong believer. He said there's 4 things you have to be happy. Can't remember them all off the top of my head, but one of them was faith. And he said it's not necessarily religious faith. It's just, he said it's proven. He goes, you don't have to have it, but in science it is proven that those who have faith or spiritual beliefs live longer and are happier. And he goes, you don't have to go with it. He's just like, it's just science. He goes, I have it, so I'm lucky, but he's like, it is a scientifically proven part that will make you happy.
But again, I think that's self-evident too, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, meet a Christian, they might annoy you, but they're definitely happier than you are.
True.
And that's probably why
the
you're
Harry
annoyed.
Krishna is walking down the road. My gosh.
Yeah, we saw some
Beaming.
Harry. You need to tell the stories, we'll not just bring it up like we're having a chat.
It could be any. Any Harry Krishnas you see
we
walking down the
were on
road.
the beachfront a few weeks ago, and there's a little group of Harry Krishnas just having the fucking time of their life.
Yeah.
Dancing, singing, playing little drums.
It's a bloody good song as well.
It was a great song. It got
Such a
stuck
good
in your
song.
head.
Yeah.
They were just chatting to everyone, and because it's Hastings and everyone's pretty accepting down here, everyone's just cheering them on. There's no.
And it was so nice seeing like just randos' faces. Like
Yeah,
everyone
everyone
not
was
one
happy.
person was like, "What the fuck are those lunatics doing in the road?" Like everyone was just like, "This is so nice."
Yeah. But
It's
this
magic.
is, I mean, I know we often bring up like, oh, this has been scientifically proven, or whatever. We never know the exact figures because we don't do that much research. But
No.
there's always some book I've read that's like, this is scientifically proven that this is the case. But actually, with so much of what we're talking about, and I think this is important to acknowledge because I don't think anybody acknowledges this enough, is that this shit is so self-evident. We know this.
Yeah.
You just have to look around.
Yeah.
Yes, sometimes that can lead to delusional thinking on all of our parts. But
Well,
fundamentally...
a lot of deluded people are very happy.
Well, that's not quite what I remember.
No, I know.
But I bring up the Catholicism thing partly because it sort of fits in with what we're talking about in this podcast in a lot of ways. Because what I know of Arthur Brooks, which is much less than you, but what I know of him is that an awful lot of the things that he suggests we do, and again in the context of like a secular way, are from Catholicism. So he talks a lot about confession. Confession being a really important part of like a healthy life.
Yeah.
And of course, we don't have the opportunity to confess in the secular world. I mean,
he says in the secular it's journaling. Journaling is a form of confession.
Right. Yeah, but most people don't journal.
Yeah.
Well, most
I
people
think
just write
more
that they're
now than
annoyed
ever,
on their Facebook wall or whatever.
Yeah, that's true.
So that's not journaling. That's not the same thing. And in a way, depending on how you do journaling, it's not the same as confession. Confession is an extraordinarily like structured thing that you do in one specific way with one specific person.
Yeah.
And you can see that person as being problematic, or the institution that they're working under as being problematic, but how do we, or you, the listener, or anybody, confess? I mean, I think, do we even view ourselves as being people that need to confess? Because we would probably have the attitude of like, fuck you, Catholic Church.
Yeah.
I don't need to confess for anything. I'm not sorry for anything. And that's fine. I'm not even saying I disagree with that attitude, but it's actually fundamentally good for you to acknowledge the fact that you've probably done some things that, even if you don't see them as bad, could be bad.
Yeah.
And to confess them.
100%. And it's about, you need to have that level of self-awareness in the first place, which it does seem like is is becoming less and less the majority view. But I do think, I think journaling is what you make of it, but what you could make of it, and what I think the point is you think back over your day and you think what went well, what didn't, and why didn't those things go well, and how much of it is in you. But yeah, you have to have the self-awareness in the first place. But if you have, I mean, one other thing, I mean, oh God, he said so many good things. He is brilliant. But one other thing he did say as part of it, it falls into the faith and spirituality bit, I think, was he said you should read something written by someone wiser than you every day. And he goes, whether that's a spiritual text, he goes, I think it should be spiritual or like a philosophy led thing. But he's like, read something written by someone cleverer than you and wiser than you every day for 15 minutes. And he goes, it'll just humble you. It'll make you realize that you are small. It'll realize that you have room to grow. And if you do it every day, it just makes you better.
When was the last time that you met anybody that acknowledged that there was people wiser than them in an active way?
Again, self-awareness is lacking.
And it's not to say that everyone's walking around thinking they're the cleverest person who ever lived. It's definitely not that. But that is not a part of our normal everyday lives. Unless you're a bit of a weirdo like we are, and you kind of do something a bit weird, like journal at the end of the day, or whatever.
Or read any books.
Reading books is a bit weird.
Well, this is another. Oh gosh, I could just quote him all day. Another thing he said is like, read something that's written that's wiser than you by someone wiser than you, and read fiction. He's just like, you have to read fiction as well. He's like, because it's another way of learning someone else's. This is how you have empathy, and this is how you can therefore have self-awareness, is by reading someone else's story. And he goes, the way that our brain can really attach to it is through imagination and through someone else's imagination.
Did he discuss whether films and TV work the same way out of interest?
He said that they do not.
Of course they don't, but out of interest, what's his...
So the way that came up immediately was Rich Roll was like, oh God, I never read. I read all the time, but I read non-fiction. He goes, but I watch a lot of films. And Arthur said, that's great, but you're watching someone else's imagination. He goes, you need to read and use your imagination to... He goes, obviously the author has imagination to write the story, but it requires your imagination to follow it and picture it and think about it. Whereas a film has done that work mostly for you. So he said there is some. He goes, I'm sure. He goes, I don't know the studies on it, but he's just like, but it is fiction and reading the fiction that will do it.
Yeah.
So he's like, start your day with wisdom, end it with fiction. Do what you want.
Although on some level, even if you're reading non-fiction, I think if you're reading anything, you're conjuring up a certain level of... I think it works in the same way, reading, even non-fiction.
And read a real book was the other thing, which I think is self-evident.
Well, you're not picturing anything. That's interesting. I've never thought about this, and sorry to keep going on about social media, but that's sort of what we do here. I mean, it's been a while since I've done it, but I'm certainly not pretending to be completely ignorant of this, and like having never done it, I clearly have. What do we picture anything when we're reading a Facebook wall? And I'm sure everyone's different. I'm not saying there's one answer to this, but do we picture anything? Do we have the same? So if I sit down and read a book, right? Let's say a non-fiction book that's specifically about. I'm not going to use a specific thing, but a political movement, right? Whilst I'm reading that book, partly because I'm engaged with it over a long period of time, probably, but there's a degree of imagination which would need to be used in order for that to happen. So if the author brings up some thinker from the past, at least to some extent, I'm creating an idea of them saying the words that are in the book, or if something's happened to them, I'm sort of picturing that vaguely. Now, if somebody on Facebook wanted to write about the very same subject, choose the exact same whatever it is, whatever that subject is, does it have the same effect? I feel like it doesn't, but I can't honestly explain why, because you're still just reading words and they're going into your head. But maybe it's because there's other things flashing on the screen, or maybe it's that the person writing it, there's a little picture of their face next to it, and they're probably someone you know, so you kind of, rather than necessarily thinking about, I don't know who, Martin Luther King or something, I don't know, then you're not picturing him, you're picturing whoever's writing about Martin Luther King saying it, maybe. Or maybe it's the style, maybe because it's probably blunter and less literary. I don't know.
And also, I mean, maybe it's not that, I mean, people choose to write books for certain reasons, but people choosing to write something on their Facebook is usually quite heavily loaded with some sort
I
of
think this, or
political
I feel
view,
this,
or social opinion, or something
so
like that. And
books
also,
can
I
be
think,
too, though,
yeah, well,
of course.
that's why I mean, that doesn't really work. I also think maybe I'm sure there'll be a study on this, and I'm sure there may be an answer. But this is my wondering. I wonder if it's probably not immediate. So if I'm reading a book, I'm wondering, it's not the first page, maybe. It's probably, you have to get into that almost flow state. It's not really a flow state, but I think you have to get into the mode of reading before your imagination starts. I wonder. I mean, I couldn't tell you off the top of my head. But I wonder if you have to kind of get into that mode before that stuff starts happening. And Facebook isn't built for that. Facebook's built for, or all the social media platforms are built for, read this as quick as you can. In fact, actually, if we can shorten it into just a
well, like Corey Feldman
picture.
using 2 instead of 2, and you instead of you.
And that breaks it.
Yeah, no, that's interesting.
I mean,
I suppose because I find, and this might just be my brain, but I feel like this is kind of a sensible thing that must at least happen to most people in some way, is that if I'm reading a book, it takes me probably, let's say, between 10 and 30 pages before I get into the flow of the way the person writes. So for me, I tend to go back, or if I really liked a book, and I tend to go back and read the first chapter or something again, because I find it takes me that long to get into however they write or talk, maybe, or whatever it is. And because I jump from, because I jump from author to author, and obviously everybody writes completely differently. So it takes me a little while to kind of get into the mode of whoever it is I happen to be reading. Well, so I suppose in the context of a Facebook wall or an Instagram wall or whatever, a Twitter thing, you're constantly just hearing different voices. Mm-hmm. So even if they were all quite long and thought out, and which of course they're not, but even if they were really, deep, considered pieces that they were all writing, you'd never get into the flow of one person's cadence and one person's way of thinking. Yeah,
and therefore not picturing the stuff along the way, like, because that's what it was about, wasn't it? It was trying to, can you actually picture things?
Yeah.
When you're reading off a Facebook wall. No, I mean, no, I don't. I just don't think it's built for that. And I think the flashing and the all flashing, all the different images and how quick it is, and the fact that it's on a scrolling loop. I just think it's just not built for you to pay your attention to. Yeah, all of those things
are definitely proved by social scientists and scientists generally, and obviously the marketing people at Facebook as well aren't pretending. I mean, they're trying to just get your attention all the time. And I suppose also it's not. One of the other things is it's not as simple. And in fairness, I think it was this simple to begin with. It's not as simple as I've got 10 friends. All of them have posted something, let's just pretend, very thoughtful on their Facebook walls. And so I've logged onto Facebook and then I read one friend's thoughtful thing, then another friend's thoughtful thing. It's not that at all, is it?
No, it's interspersed with
all sorts of things
and targets.
And shit that people have shared for no reason.
And I think because it's all short, I mean, do you recall any of this? Do you remember any of this in any detail?
Well, it's not made to be recalled.
Exactly. And then how is it important in the slightest? No, you've just wasted your brain doing that.
Yeah.
And your brain has not even attached itself to it by creating images and taking it on board properly.
I'd say
waste
that there's
of life, I'd say.
Well, I'd say that there's almost certainly another viewpoint to this. But I must say, I know. I mean, I've read quite a lot of this sort of stuff. The people that create this would say exactly the same as what we're saying.
Oh, God.
I mean, it's not like I'm not sure. I don't know if there's anybody on the planet Earth who would say "Oh no, that's wrong." No, I get loads out of my Facebook feed. I don't. I mean, admittedly, I suppose I'm obviously the person that people who know my opinions on this, they're probably going to say all the bad things about social media as opposed to the good. So I'm not. But I don't know. I don't think there's anybody, even people that use it loads, who would say, yeah, Facebook is fucking great. It fills my life with absolute joy.
Well,
most people say, I look at it too much. It's a nightmare.
Well, there was, and now we've probably mentioned this before, but there's been study after study of, groups of students who are asked, who would love to just give up their social media account? And they all say yes. And they go, why aren't you doing it? And I might miss something.
Yeah.
And so the argument is, if everyone got rid of it, you would get rid of it too, because you wouldn't be missing anything. It's not the thing that you like, it's the fact that if you didn't log on, you're worried that you'll miss something because everyone else is on it.
But that's literally a description of an addiction.
Yeah.
And I mean, obviously it is an addiction.
Yeah.
I mean, because you're actually as well, you're not, whilst that's how you might describe it, or a person might describe it, actually in reality what's happening inside them chemically is just that dopamine fix thing. Oh,
and so the balance of the two is just horrific. That's why we can't get off our phones.
I almost don't think there is a balance of the two. That's what I'm trying to say. I think one of them is all of us putting our addiction into some sort of context that makes sense.
Yeah.
So that whole thing of like fear of missing out thing.
Yeah.
I don't honestly think it's genuine. Because I think it's just us. What it is that it's our way of describing something else which is going on. It's like the words we use to describe I'm fully addicted to this, and the only way that I can be made in any way happy, and it's not even happiness, is little dopamine releases.
True.
And
but
my
I
excuse
wonder...
for that is that I don't want to miss out on anything. What you actually don't want to miss out on is a tiny amount of dopamine every 4 seconds.
I think it's a mixture of things as well. You know, if you went to a gig and everyone was drinking and you'd be like, oh, I don't want to not drink because everyone's drinking. If everyone wasn't drinking, you probably wouldn't drink.
Oh, no, 100%.
So, that's what I mean. It's not just addiction.
Well, no, but that is addiction. What you've just described is addiction. Because fundamentally,
it's social norms.
Well, yeah, but if you're not... Yeah, but that sort of is a type of addiction, isn't it?
No, but if you were addicted to alcohol, you'd still drink it. What I'm saying is if everyone stopped doing it, and you were just doing it socially... I would imagine people would stop unless you had an actual addiction. I'm just saying there is addiction and there's the social norm side of it.
But also addiction's on a scale, I suppose, is what I'm trying to say. And so, yes, all right, sorry. If you go out and everyone else is drinking and you can't not drink, then doesn't necessarily mean you're a full-on alcoholic. Right. But there is a degree of addiction there because what you're addicted to is not standing out from the rest of the people and not. So again, if you think of addiction in the context of just purely dopamine, which is what addictions are, but there's again very, very different levels of it, and this is why there's physical addiction and psychological addiction, of course, as well.
Yeah, someone it definitely must have been Arthur Brooks. I've watched too many of them this week. They said about the way that social media is just not seen in the same way as an addiction. If you changed using your phone for social media to a glass of wine and someone, you went for a glass of wine first thing in the morning or just before bed, the last thing you do is you drink a glass of wine, someone would tell you've got a fucking issue. But if it's like, no, I'm just checking my work emails because my work boss needs me, it's like, no, you're addicted to it. No one needs you at 9 at night or 11 at night. You're just addicted to that thing. And the same as it's the first thing you check in the morning. It's not... That's an addiction. If it was wine, someone would call you an alcoholic, but because it's social media, everyone just says it's normal and everyone does it.
Don't you think as well that covers over the things that really are addictive, really are damaging? And by that, what I mean is, if you'd use an excuse, so you're looking at your phone, you're looking at a screen, and you say, well, no, this is just normal, this is what everybody does. The thing is that things like porn addiction become something that you can quite easily say, no, I haven't got that, because it's the sort of the same thing. It's different, but it's the same. Yeah. And so, and in the same way as like, I would say that people are addicted to sort of anger and agitation. Now, I don't think that you could prove this as an actual addiction, but fundamentally you're like, no, I'm just looking at my phone. I'm just doing what everyone does. I'm just looking at Facebook. But actually what you're doing is just upsetting yourself and getting angry and being angry at other people and creating anger in other people and making this storm in a fucking...
And social media knows that that's addictive because that's what's like the algorithms. I mean, I can't remember.
Well, again, they don't pretend that they don't find it. They know that that's addictive and they admit it.
Fear gets the most communication. It's also because our brain's hardwired for fear. Like if there's 9 happy things and 1 terrible thing, our brain goes to the terrible thing, and that's because of our, existence.
Well, you think it could be a tiger in a bush that's about to jump out and eat you in an evolution.
It's our old evolution brain trying to keep us alive. We don't look at the happy things. That's something, oh God, I'm going to just sound like Arthur Brooks' biggest fan. But he keeps reiterating, Mother Nature does not want us to be happy. Mother Nature wants us to survive and pass our genes on. Yeah. And the way to do that isn't by being happy, it's by being alive. So we seek fear, we seek the things that are freaking us out, and our body does stupid things for our happiness, but it does things to ensure that we stay alive, and we have to kind of be aware. The only thing we can do is to be aware of it and work around it.
Well, do you know what? Let's just keep this going. Yeah. So I'm not going to do mine yet. I might do mine at the end.
You can be around
because what you've just said is a perfect. It might take a bit of doing this, but you've basically led into what I wanted to talk about.
Fantastic! It's like we meant it.
So that aspect of like evolutionary thought, in which we're actually just hardwired in order to stay alive and not be happy. Mm-hmm. I think has a standing on the fact that for the last few episodes of this podcast, we have gone into them with the attitude of, let's be positive this time. The last episode, we moaned, we said democracy was pointless in one episode, more or less.
A couple episodes back was, bad.
And then we went into the last one and we were like, right, this time we're really going to, and in a way we've just done it for the last however long we've been on recording this. You go in with this attitude of like, we're going to talk about these amazing things, this transcendence and this awe, and we're going to be really positive. And then what happens is you immediately just start talking negatively. And I suppose, and last episode we literally said we're not going to talk negatively on this episode. We're going to be more positive, and we sort of were, but we ended up going down the same kind of rabbit holes. And it got me thinking about why that might be. Two people who are really genuinely trying to talk about positive things just end up talking about a lot of negativity. And I think that it is because I suppose I've got a few different things to suggest. One of them is that we're not made to be happy. Mm-hmm. So that complements what happiness actually means, and what we've been brought to believe. And I think a lot of people don't realise how much of an influence this has had probably on all of our lives. Is what we've been brought to believe is all comes from that sort of like positive thinking movement. It's like, if you just think yourself happy, you just be happy. Just ignore all the bad stuff and be happy. Yeah. The thing is that time and time again, thousands of books have been written about this. And, this is the classic like self-help book and self-help movement and self-help everything. Is this suggestion that basically all you need to really do is here's a few tools, maybe a breathing technique, maybe a meditation, maybe something, but it will just make you happy. That's just going to make you happy. The thing is that what we therefore see as being happiness is sort of like being joyous all the time and like having a brilliant life. And so if any of us probably listed the things that I'm going to make an assumption here, but I think this is true of humanity. Most people wouldn't necessarily consider themselves ultimately happy. Like, absolutely, I am 100% sorted. I've got, most people, and to varying degrees, and obviously to a vast majority of people, keeping in mind the mental health crisis that we're going through, the loneliness crisis we're going through, most people would be very far away from saying that they're absolutely happy. But the thing is I genuinely believe that what they believe happiness is not actually what happiness is. And the example that I want to bring up, and I do think that this is related to that kind of evolutionary stance that we're all in our minds, which is that actually our biology is just kind of trying to deal with a situation that we no longer live in. Mm-hmm. Yeah. The example that I want to use is flow. We've talked about the flow state before, and the thing is with the flow state, which is ultimately, I think, and I'm going to be a bit over the top here, but the flow state is kind of like the ideal human state. In so many ways. It's like where we get most of our work done. It's where we forget about all of our troubles. It's where we just put ourselves into the thing that we want to do. Yeah,
like time passes by.
Yeah. But the flow state involves two different things. One of them is that the thing that you're doing, and I'm really simplifying this, but one of them is that the thing that you're doing you're really enjoying and you're really invested in, right? But the other is that it's hard.
Yeah.
It has to be like at the very edge of your abilities to keep you enthralled in it. Mm-hmm. And in a way I'm using this metaphorically, and in a way I'm using this literally. I kind of think that the reason that no one is happy is because they don't appreciate that bit that we need to be. We need difficulty in our lives. We need discomfort in our lives. We need to be made uncomfortable, and that's what happiness actually is kind of being in a slightly difficult circumstance, but making the most of it and kind of being able to live your life within it. But what I think we're fed, and this is definitely, as an ex-mental health nurse and as a current mental health nurse, I can absolutely say, it's like the antidepressant argument. I have nothing against antidepressants, and I'm not going to get into that whole fucking bog of mental health. But what we're told is, and this is totally from Brave New World, is that, oh, you're sad. Here's something that involves no effort on your part, ch will make you happy. Yeah. And
it's impossible.
Well, and also it doesn't work. No. Again, I was a psychiatric nurse for 13 years. I met, I don't know how many, tens of thousands, probably. Mm-hmm. In fact, definitely, if you really think about it, of depressed people. All of them, some of them on insane amounts of antidepressants, but they weren't happy. They hadn't suddenly been made happy. And the reason they hadn't been made happy is because their lives weren't changed in any way. And so I suppose I just wanted to talk, but I think that's one of the reasons why when we're trying to talk about positive things, we end up talking about negative things, because actually the negative things are a part of positivity. Yeah. But we just don't see them as such. So I don't know if I'm really making this clear or not, but
no, I think you are.
That we need difficulty in our lives is basically, I suppose, what I'm trying to say. And so, and when I listen back to these, because I sort of edit this together a little bit, very little.
Can you believe there's editing?
As I'm sure you've noticed. But when I listen back to them, it's like, because I'm sort of listening to it from a slightly different perspective. And this might come from meditation as well. I mean, there's an element of meditation that because we're both meditating a bit, and there's an element of that where you're kind of stepping out of yourself and viewing yourself from a separate place, or at least there has been for me. That's what I've been sort of trying to do. One of the things I've been trying to do. And that's a really good way as well in our lives, I think. If you're angry about something, if you're able to step outside and look at yourself as if you're
observing yourself,
then you can put things into context a lot better. But anyway, listening back to the podcast is almost a version of that. It's kind of me, because we're just coming up with this shit off the top of our heads. Again, I'm sure that's very obvious. But so it's not like I finished this and I know all the things that I said and I can remember all the things that you said. So listening back to it, it just sounds like two people desperately trying to. It's almost like two people trying to get this point across without even knowing that they're trying to get this point across.
Right.
This is the conclusion that I've come to after listening to our podcast. I don't know if this was the conclusion that the listener has come to. But my question maybe is like, what do we do about that? And, and I have a lot of opinions.
Not obvious at all. No, well, first, just to say, I completely agree. And again, gosh, gonna quote Arthur Brooks the entire time, but he's just come up at a really good time in life, in this podcast, and just in general. But it's proven scientifically over and over again, the journey is better than the payoff every time. Yeah. And it has to be a difficult journey. And no one's ever looked back at something that was hard. Not no one's ever, but I think there was some study once where it was like people had gone through something really difficult and they were given an option, like a metaphorical option, a hypothetical option of keep it in their life and continue on as if it never happened, as if nothing has ever changed, or here's a button you can press and it'll get rid of that hard time that you had. And it's something like 90% of people said that they would not remove the hard time because they've learned from it and it is eventually given them some sort of joy. And I just think that it links to this a little bit. The other thing is that they've done science. Oh God, the scientists of the world. Boffins have done the experiments to prove over and over again that the dopamine payoff of merely receiving something and working for something, they're working for something every single time. There's never one time where someone just getting a surprise item or being given, I want a thing, here's that thing, or I want a thing, I'm going to have to work for it. And the work for it is usually, like you say, there's a negative aspect, it's tiring, or whatever the journey is, it might have been difficult. And the more difficult, the more the payoff. I think I'm going to just say it as truth, but I think it is true. So there definitely is a level of, you've got to go through something to get there. It's also about something I'm going to misquote entirely, but something that they were discussing on these podcasts about happiness isn't an emotion. It's something you have to work for, and it's something that we are in the modern world told we deserve, which is hilarious because, you know, we're built not to have it.
Well, it's not just that we deserve it though, is it? It's the things. So I'm not saying this is of everybody, but this is definitely capitalism is 100% behind this. Like what we're told, it's not just what we deserve, but it's like what happiness is.
Yeah.
What happiness is. And most of our political movements, by the way, are based entirely on this concept. What happiness is, in I think the vast majority of people's eyes, even if they don't necessarily think this is what they see happiness is having a load of money, living in the place that they want, under the conditions that they want, eating the food they want, no matter what that is. I suppose things like maybe like going on holiday, and then there probably are a few that are genuinely worthwhile, like having a decent relationship. I think that going back to what you were talking about earlier, though, we tend to see that as like a romantic partner. We don't necessarily see that as having like 5 or 6 really close friends. And of course, all of those things are actually fucking bad for us, I would say.
Well, there's 2 aspects. So some of those things do bring you happiness, but there's a reason. So the money thing, there's two sides. There's 2 things I want to say. One is, no matter how much money you have, again, proven over and over again, if money brings you happiness, every single person who are in these studies, like how much money would make you happy, is always a quantifiably larger sum than what they already have. Yeah, so for example, and there's no limit on this. So someone who earns 20 grand a year will say, well, do you know what, 80 grand a year will make me happy. Yeah. So you'd think if you went to someone who earns 80 grand a year, they'd be the happiest person alive. No. 200 grand would make them happy. Yeah. And it never ends. So money isn't the thing that makes you happy.
But there has been also another study, which, sorry if I'm cutting in because this might be what you're about to say, but I'll forget if I don't get it in now.
Yeah.
There's been another study. There is a set amount
it's
of
that
which,
Kahneman study,
if you ever earn more, and it's a very small amount. I'm pretty sure that at the time it was done.
70 grand at the time.
Oh, I thought it was less than that, to be honest. But I suppose it depends. That might be dollars.
It was dollars, yeah.
So I think so whatever that is. But it's for some reason I thought it was 20 grand. But anyway, there's like a set amount by which if you earn anything over that amount, it doesn't make you any more happier. If you earn less than it, then earning more up to that point will make you genuinely happier. And what that I know without doubt that what that figure is just that you can afford the base. You don't have to be scared of not getting a meal. It's the real baseline. And it's, don't get me wrong, it's what some people aren't earning that, and we live in a fucked up society. Yeah. This is why universal, basic income needs to fucking happen, and probably won't. Yeah,
true. The other thing, and the other argument that money, the way in which money could make you happy, and the way in which things like holidays and things like that could make you happy. Because one way they don't is that you don't live in that moment, and the amount of people that are on holiday and they're thinking about their next one is like, fucking hell, you're on holiday, like. Have a nice time. And I did it the other day. I'm already planning for next October, and we're going away this October, and I really hate it. I'm like, no, stop thinking about the future, like you've not even lived through the good things yet. But and it's, again, harking back to this Arthur Brooks, he said another thing that you have to do is make memories. And so one of the things that holidays and money and all this stuff can allow you to do, but one of the reasons you also need to keep friends is it's the making of memories. So he's like saying, like, you have to go out and do things, and it's not the doing of the thing. It's not eating in the fancy restaurant that will make you happy. It's not going on holiday that makes you happy. It's making the memories.
Well, it's being with people that you love, and relationships and community.
It's all of those things, and it's the memories that you make, and those memories. And this is another reason why toil and strife are good things. and lead to happiness is because it's you're making memories along the way. Imagine like it's I don't know, really basic metaphor is there's a mountain. Imagine there's a lift that could get you to the top and you can see all the views. Imagine you spent 5 hours climbing it. Like, clearly the climb is going to knack you out. You're going to be tired. There may be really difficult bits. You might be terrified, but that's the one that will make you happier. Get the lift down.
The modern attitude is definitely, well, why the fuck would I walk up that?
Yeah, why would I do
That's
that?
hard. I'll get the lift.
Of
course
Uber.
I get a lift. You're an idiot. Like, I can't even be bothered to go out and buy a takeaway. I have to get a little man on a...
I can't even be bothered to go to the shop to buy coffee, like ground coffee. I can get Just Eats to get from Co-op. I don't even have to fucking do that anymore.
But so that's, and I think that's quite an interesting one, because I mean, this is a very basic one, and this doesn't change your life anyway, but that is what is a really big part of modern life that I look at, and I just sort of think
just because you can doesn't
the
mean
privilege that we have is making our life worse.
Yeah.
Someone can drop your food into you every day and you never have to go to the supermarket, and you would say, I think most people would say, well, that's brilliant, isn't it? I hate going to the supermarket. It's terrible going to the supermarket. I've got to deal with all these people. They're loud. There's kids everywhere. It's awful. But of course, if you go to the supermarket, you bump into people you actually engage with the food. I mean, there's something about, we've been cooking a lot more.
Yeah.
And and I've never really thought about it before, but one of the aspects of cooking is, if I'm going to cook a meal, which for me is a really rewarding thing to do for a lot of different reasons, which maybe we'll get into. But one of them is the process of going around and picking the ingredients up off the shelf and picking the one that you want. And I'm no fucking chef. I'm not, I don't know what I'm doing, but it doesn't really matter, because there's a real tactile pleasure in that, which you remove completely if someone else does it for you.
Oh my God, let's get into the energy that's in a homemade meal as opposed to one that just turns up. I mean, if we really, I'm not necessarily a believer of this, but home cooked food always tastes better than such and such. And if you've gone and picked everything rather than just got dumped the stuff from the delivery man,
it's not just
if you want to be
but
flouncy.
but you don't even have to be flouncy. The thing is, it's not necessarily about it tasting better. It's that it tastes of the effort that you put into it. And so obviously this isn't necessarily true of people that eat alone, but like, so for me, a real pleasure, even if I've made a meal that's not that nice, is that you eat it. Like,
you get pleasure of making a nice meal,
because hopefully sometimes
eat this shit.
Hopefully sometimes you enjoy it, but
I enjoy it.
But what I'm trying to say is there's a real like process there, isn't there? And the cooking of it I enjoy. I try and do it quite mindfully. All of the bullshit words that I'm now not actually going to use to describe this, but you can look at cooking in quite a spiritual way if you want, and I do actually. And if you do, then that's what it becomes. Yeah. Again, be careful who you pretend to be, because you are who you pretend to be.
Yeah.
But ultimately, the point is that you get to eat the food at the end of this long process. Yeah. If you remove that, like loads of different aspects of that process, then you're losing out.
Yeah.
And your life is easier, but it's worse. Yeah. And I think, I mean, food is a really interesting one as well, and maybe we shouldn't go too far down this route, and I definitely don't want to sound preachy in any way at all, but the what we see as success, i.e. having all the money in the world to buy whatever food you want and have it delivered to your door, I don't think anyone could possibly see that as being exclusively good. Like, so a lot of people could quite easily. In fact, I know people, and I mean, most of them are really big. Most of them, in nursing, when you're doing a lot of long shifts, you're working loads and loads, you're fucking knackered at the end of the shift. And I don't doubt that most people doing most jobs feel that way. I used to know people, I suppose, who would almost have a takeaway every night.
Yeah.
And it's like they could just about afford to do that. I mean, they certainly weren't rich. They were on a nurse's salary, but they probably didn't have kids, and they whatever. And it's like, but so in a way, you could say that person's living like a king or queen. Like, this person is, they're eating whatever they want. If they want the most expensive chocolate bar in in Waitrose.
Ooh.
They can go to Waitrose and they can buy the most expensive chocolate bar, and this all seems brilliant, right? Except the problem is that you eat like shit, and so you feel like shit, and diet has a huge effect on your mental health and obviously your physical health, and you don't get any of the pleasure of, you lose all the skills that you might have once had as far as like cooking for yourself. Like, I get that it's nice to have a takeaway every now and again, and I'm certainly not saying anything negative about that, but it's like almost like the ideal. There's a film that was made that I've not seen it, but I read about it, called The Happiest Man Alive.
Okay.
And it's some guy who I think is in his 40s or 50s, and he's
a fictional film.
No, a real film. It's a documentary, and he is a guy who obviously made loads and loads of money, is insanely rich. And he decided that he loves the thing he loved the most. He's single. I think his marriage broke up and he was on his own. And he decided the thing that he loves the most is going on pleasure cruises. He's at his happiest when he's on a pleasure cruise, right? So he's basically booked in for the last decade. He's been on a pleasure cruise because he's got that much money.
Pleasure cruise?
Just a cruise.
A cruise. Sorry, because pleasure cruise.
Not a sexy thing. It's not a sex thing.
It's like what?
But of course, if it was a sex thing, that's a really good example as well. If you've got all the money in the world and you can basically pay to have sex with anyone you want, or have some sort of attract people by that money, you're not going to have a loving relationship, are you? Anyway. Okay. That's a whole other thing. But this guy has spent 10 years living on this cruise, and he says, so again, I've only read a description of the film, but he says at the start, basically, look, I've never got to make my own bed, I've never got to cook for myself, I've never got to do anything. I'm weighted on hand and foot. It's like being a king. It's incredible. It's so brilliant. Every night I've got something to do. I'm out on the high seas. I love being out on the high seas. It's beautiful. I've got a deluxe massive room, a beautiful bed. I'm incredibly comfortable. And the film basically just follows him around. And of course, his life is immeasurably sad. He doesn't realise it. He thinks he's brilliant. He thinks he's doing the right thing. But he's trying to make friends with people. Everyone thinks he's a lunatic because he's living on a cruise. So they don't really want to talk to this guy that's been on a cruise for 10 years. And he's completely unaware of all of this.
Also, it's such a made-up social construct.
Well, exactly.
Isn't it?
I mean, it literally sounds like prison.
It sounds like a psychiatric unit.
Well, yeah.
A very, very nice one.
Well, of course. And in that context, it doesn't sound like prison either. But, it's... Why, like, that, in some ways... when we say things like, I fucking hate Donald Trump because he's got all the money in the world, the thing is he may not literally be living on a cruise liner, but he's sort of living in the equivalent of a cruise liner. Yeah. It's just a bigger cruise liner. And same with Jeff Bezos and fucking Elon Musk and all of these people. Elon Musk is a really good example because he's obviously such a damaged, miserable, awful human being who has every opportunity in the entire world, but his life is shit.
Well, so he is, just to butt in about Elon Musk, they mentioned him on one of the podcasts I listened to, and it was about the glorification of work and hard working and not taking time to rest and be fun and have a life. And they said Elon Musk has famously said once he's not had a day off in like 15 years or something. And everyone goes, oh my God, yeah, well done. And it's like, no, that is terrible. And again, they likened it to addiction. They were like, imagine if there's someone said, I haven't had a day without alcohol in 15 years and you got applauded for it. It's like, no, like a work addiction is also not to be applauded. But anyway, just wanted to, because he's not a happy man. I mean, it's clearly it's written all over him. Yeah, no, absolutely. But yeah, terrible.
But I think, it's this, there's a weird disconnect, I think, in most of our, and again, I do think this is like based on a lot of our sort of like political movements. So many political movements are based around capitalism and capital, more importantly. And there are obviously inadequacies, and there's, but there's this kind of like, I think almost like quite racist attitude towards, for example, the developing world. I mean, even calling it the developing world is assumptions on, it's like it's only developing because of capitalism. It's becoming more capitalistic.
Oh yeah.
But the studies show that most places in the developing world are infinitely happier as far as their population is concerned. They're way poorer, but they're way happier than everybody in Britain, everybody in America, and everybody in most of Europe. Yeah. Not all of Europe. and I think some places have probably got it right. You know, I bring up Sweden a lot. Like, I think that or I've thought of Sweden before. I think there are, and Denmark, like there are places that are extremely rich and their populations are quite happy.
Yeah, they have their issues of their own. But
of course,
when it comes to happiness,
but everybody
they're pretty
does.
Good. Yeah, exactly.
But that's, you know, you can concentrate on the good or the bad.
Yeah, of course.
But there's this sort of attitude that like we've got it right. Just the whole, again, I'm not saying obviously developing nations some of them are extraordinarily poor and some people live in extraordinary poverty, and that's awful. And I'm not sort of saying, oh, they're great, they're having the time of their life. I'm not saying that at all. But my point is why I think it's racist is because we have this attitude that we've somehow got it right. Mm-hmm. So Britain is great, and all the white people in Britain, or not just the white people, but like all of us in Britain have got this amazing opportunity to live with all of this privilege. But there's elements of that privilege which are actually just making us all fucking miserable.
Yeah.
Whereas there are lots of countries in the world who don't have what we would describe as a privilege, but they have other privileges like community, like faith.
Well, that's exactly the argument to be made, isn't it? It's if money and an easy life is the thing that makes us happy, then why is the US and the UK going through a mental health crisis right now? Why is this anxiety through the roof? Why is no one happy?
Yeah, also, why do we use money? So one of the ultimate, and again, I have nothing against this argument whatsoever. Please know this is not. I know Siobhan turned it into GB News last episode, but I'm not doing that.
Sorry,
but like the ultimate thing that you often hear people hear as far as like an argument against sexism or racism is that, you know, whatever it is, 90% of CEOs are white men. And of course that, you know, that's fine. If that's important to you, that should be changed, then that doesn't seem fair. But the thing is, who the fuck wants to be a CEO?
Yeah.
Why aren't we concentrating on who the happiest people are?
Yeah.
And maybe going back, and I mean, again, this is not a men's rights argument whatsoever, but just going back to like that discussion we were having about sort of like that kind of time in a lot of men's lives where they don't have any friends and they suddenly wake up and they realise their dreams haven't come true.
Twinned with
suicide rate. Yeah, and then also maybe if their wives die, they're completely useless.
Yeah.
It's like that's surely the I don't know. Privilege is not the right word, but that's like a really shit place to be.
Yeah.
So they might be rich, but they need a men's shed. Is what they
also imagine that you've raced to make all that money to retire early for what?
And then what are you doing? You're on a cruise ship.
You just being
miserable. But I mean, none of this is arguments against any of these arguments, if you see what I mean. But it's just that it's just a really complicated issue that I think that we ignore. The point that I'm trying to make isn't that any of them are wrong, but it's that we should also be looking at the more important things in life, which again are community and friendship and love. Faith.
Yeah. It's all those things, and I think it's being aware. So it's every time you go to do something, like, is this making me happy? Why? Like, it's about that, trying to take that step back, and it's real hard to do, and it only gets easier the more you do it. But it's about trying to catch yourself in that moment and go, do I actually want this? Why do I want this? Is it for happiness reasons, or is it for something that's ultimately not going to lead to any happiness, and therefore do I still need to do it?
But this might be a good reason. This might be a very good reason why you need to be, or we all need to be, reading people that are more intelligent than us. Just going back, because what you've just described is perfect. You're absolutely right. That's exactly what we need to do. But are we actually able to do that for ourselves? Probably not. Like any of us.
No, God, it's really hard.
Because how do you critique yourself in that way? And you can do a lot of work, and again, I mean, that whole meditation might help or whatever. Yeah. There's lots of things you can do, but most of us probably can't really take that third person view of ourselves and say, "Is this making me happy or not?" Most of us just feel like, "Well, yeah. This is what I've always wanted."
Yeah.
And that is why I think we need other voices that aren't our own.
100%. If you just sit in this little bubble of your own voice, then you're never going to be able to think of this has literally happened to me in the last 2 weeks. Every week I hear some other like voice that's really helpful. And this last 2 weeks, Arthur Brooks has come in my life and is making me a happier person. He's got tons and tons of different methods for things. And because he's like a scientist who's clearly got a very like I don't know, like he has quarterly meetings with his wife.
Oh yeah.
I mean, it's not, some of it is not desirable in my opinion in the slightest, but it's about where they like
we have 2 weekly meetings with each other,
but it's
on
something
air.
Yeah, but it's something. It's about looking back at like what made you happy, what didn't work, and what to do more of in the next 3 months. He also does this fucking mad thing where he's got his own little like graph. It might be him or it might be, because I've listened to a few other people and there's someone else who was very, very good on the happiness thing too, where it's like they have their own dashboard of things and it's divided into, I don't know, areas in which they think they're excelling. I can't remember. There's 4 or 5 different particular areas.
This does sound a bit like you're describing misery.
No, but it's insane.
This is almost like the guy on the cruise ship.
It's slightly insane, but
I'm really happy because I've got graphs.
But it's a little like almost barometer that he keeps to himself, and it's just like, because there's always something that will give and always something that will gain. So it's just like, if family is going really well, but work is actually stressing me out, it's just like, okay, I paid a lot of attention to my family, but the work, it's always a balance is what he's trying to say.
Doesn't he give himself a score? Is this based on the balance? Doesn't he give him? He says like, I'm a B- in my marriage right now, so I need to get myself up to an A+.
It's something, I'm sure it is something like that. I think he even quotes his happiness score at one point. He's just like, I used to be a 3 and now I'm a 4.8. And I'm like, what? You knew that just straight off the top of your head.
That sounds like psychopathy.
So some of it, and this is the fine line. Like some of these people do come off a bit psychopathic, but it's absolutely fine. But he's got loads of things, and one of them is like, he has this thing called a reverse bucket list. On his birthday every year, he gets rid of things.
Oh,
and he's
nice.
just like, but it's not just things. So, and I think this is really interesting because I heard it a few times because I've heard him speak on a few other podcasts now. And he's like, I don't just get rid of my possessions. He's like, one year I got rid of 1/3 of all my clothes. And he was a bit like psychopathic. I was like, not all the good ones. And I was like, oh my, because Rich Roll's just like, but you're very dressy. Like, was that hard? And he was like, no, trust me, I didn't get rid of all my good stuff. Which I kind of like because it's, you know, everyone's imperfect. So it was cool to just like, you know, he's not stupid in that way. But he also said 1 year, he goes, the year just passed. He goes, I got rid of my political opinions. He's just like, they serve me no use. And he goes, too many families, you know, get together at Thanksgiving and, you know, you're in the room with the Trump supporter and the whole event becomes about berating your uncle who supported Trump. And it's just like, but that's your uncle that you've got all these memories with, who is also your, you know, is your family member. And why are you letting your political opinions ruin this entire thing for a family? And that just makes me think of all these people that like, you know, fall out with their friends over a political opinion. And he's just like, life is more than that. And when you make life so about that, and he goes, I came from a Washington think tank where my job was to be political. He's like, trust me, I have all the opinions in the world. I think the more I listen to him now, I think what he's getting at is he's Catholic and he's probably anti-abortion. So yeah, I imagine
he would be,
in the world of where he's very liberal. I think only on like 3 or 4 times of him explaining this, I'm like, oh gosh, yeah, I bet he gets into some right old. But anyway, he's just like, it doesn't matter my belief.
Just very quickly on that. So you just assume this is an interesting modern world.
Well, yeah, I've made it a massive issue.
No. I don't mean. Let's just say he absolutely is, right? Yeah. For the sake of argument. The thing is that, so you said, what you said was, I'm sure he gets into things with other people. Well, no, he probably doesn't if he's given up politics. The thing is if you're against abortion, but you shut the fuck up about it and just live your own life, you know, who's to...
True, but what he gave it up because he was getting involved.
Oh, I see.
Like
yeah.
That's why he gave him up. He said, but my political opinions only brought me suffering and brought people around me suffering. And he's just like, actually, it doesn't matter. Like, I'm going to be politically interested. I'm not an idiot. I want to use my vote. I have my opinions. He's like, what I've realized is I'm just going to halve them. I'm going to lose my connection to them in the personal way, and allow myself to be with people and see the good in them because there's good in everyone somewhere. Whereas if you only judge people by their political opinions, you live a crappy life. And I was like, that is so interesting. But yeah, anyway, that was just some of the other things he did he advises for being happy.
That blows my mind a little bit because so I was trying to think around coming up with, maybe we should do this podcast next time, because I was thinking around this idea that I had about what would happen if, it's so weird, honestly, It's going to sound like I'm making this up. What would happen if you just gave up politics completely? And I was sort of thinking my way around it, and I thought, and I could see the good side of it, and I could see the bad side of it. And I've had this thing in my head for ages, which is like, if I was going to do it, it's probably sort of, again, just to sort of word it in a way for a podcast, probably. Yeah. But it's like, from now on, I'm not going to be, I don't know, I'm not going to be anti-racist. I'm just going to be kind. I'm not going to be anti-sexist. I'm just going to be nice to people. I'm not going to be anti anything. I'm going to be forgiving or something.
And now you sound like a Buddhist.
Well, no, but the thing is, I mean, that's probably where this idea came from. But I mean, it was like, I was thinking around this and thinking of all of the arguments against it, and I can imagine that it would sound awful.
Oh, it sounds like you are denying all these people that have problems. You're denying there are problems. I'm saying that would be the argument.
No, and maybe that argument's right, but to some extent, that's why I came up with this idea of like replacing this political context of things. So if you're kind to everybody, then of course you're not ignoring their problems. You're trying to be kind to them. And in a lot of ways, being kind to people is going to make a much bigger difference to the world than just walking around saying, "Oh, I've got a T-shirt on that says I'm against this political thing," or or moaning on Facebook about how evil person A is. It would, of course, you could do both. I mean, that's the thing. It's maybe that's the biggest flaw in my plan, I suppose, is that fundamentally what you should be doing is being kind and forgiving, but also standing up against all of the inequalities in the world. So maybe I think maybe I've just worked out what the argument against.
We won't do that podcast
against but we'll see. I've just been thinking on it and trying to. Yeah, again, it's just been an idea that I was more thinking not as like this is now my opinions, but more as a kind of good starting point for a discussion. It's interesting. So a lot of the things that you've been talking about sort of come back round to what I was going to bring up in my what I've done in the last couple of weeks that's provided me with meaning, transcendence and awe. And that is that I read a book called A Beginner's Guide to Dying, which has just come out. It's literally, when we're recording this, I don't think it's even been out for a week, I don't think. It's a very small book. You could read it in a couple of hours probably, but that is certainly not to say that it's to diminish it on any level whatsoever, because it is fucking brilliant. And it touches on a lot of the stuff that we've probably talked about in a funny sort of way, but the book is written by somebody who was given more or less 3 months to live, I think. He had cancer, which he had all sorts of different cancers, really, but because it spread. And he wrote an article. He lives in Jersey, I think, or lived in Jersey, because he's dead now. And he wrote an article for his local newspaper, and it sort of went viral because it was more or less, here's all the thoughts that I'm having. I know I'm going to die in 3 months' time. And here's all of the things that I think are important in life, basically. And he wrote 3 of these articles, and they're reprinted in the book. And then he writes a little bit on the, extra on the end. There is not a page that goes by that doesn't have something that will just knocks you out. And a lot of it is about this stuff of like, I used to be really worried about what job I did, or making enough money. And it's all going to sound quite trite, I think, coming from me. But I genuinely think if you can read this book, because coming from someone who, like I said, literally just died. So he died more or less when the book was published, having written this book over the course of the last 3 months. It's like extraordinarily real, the experience of reading this thing. But so much of it is about this. It's about like, what are the actual important things in life? Well, the important things in life, it actually turns out when it comes down to it, is family, connections, memories, all the shit that all the shit that some of which has been quite difficult to maintain. Getting some of those memories was hard. Being married to my wife has been hard sometimes, and it's had its challenges. And obviously, it's another thing about this sort of limitless version of happiness versus this limited version of happiness. If you decide to stay with one person for the rest of your life, well, you can't fuck everybody that you meet, or maybe you can if you've got that sort of relationship, and I'm not judging anybody, but of course you get all of these other amazing things, and sometimes those things aren't amazing, sometimes those things are fucking dreadful or really hard or whatever, but the ultimate thing, again, if you were maybe this is the point that I'm getting to, and this is a very Buddhist idea, if you were looking at everything from the perspective of how am I going to feel about this when I die, well, the relationship you have with the person that you love is probably going to be the biggest thing. It certainly was for this guy that was given 3 months to live, and who the fuck am I or you to argue with him?
Yeah.
He knows, and yeah, it's just a fantastic book. I can't go through everything because, like I say, there's so much sort of wisdom and it's so nicely written. He's not an academic. He's a bit like us in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
This book is like a really good version of this podcast, but also with the added attraction that the person's going to die at any minute. Which of course we are going to die at some point. So, there you go. Listen to the Sohbet Punx podcast.
We're all going to die.
We're all going to die.
Get wise.
But there is a lot of Buddhist philosophy, and maybe this is what we should talk about next week or next episode, because maybe this is where this conversation should go.
Yeah.
But there is loads of Buddhist ideas that you should just always be aware of the fact that this could be the last time you're doing something.
Yeah.
This could be
that's stoic as well. It's it's wonderful,
and not in a superficial way, in a genuine way. You literally we say shit like, I could get hit by a bus tomorrow, so I might as well do this. Well, really know that.
Yeah.
You could literally drop dead.
And it's not pessimistic.
No.
I read it in one of the Stoicism books that I read, and it was just like the amount of times you're stuck in traffic and you hate it. It was like, imagine this is the last time you're ever going to drive anywhere.
Yeah.
Like, imagine how much you would appreciate so much more about that drive.
Or imagine that person who hasn't got any legs or is just had a cancer diagnosis, who is incapable of being able to get in a car anymore.
Yeah. Imagine you lose your sight tomorrow.
Yeah.
Imagine, there's just, and that's not pessimistic. It's just like, these are all things that could happen. And it's not like catastrophic thinking either. It's just like, just take a minute to realize how amazing it is that this is something that comes up in Buddhism all the time. And it is not a nasty thing to say. It is just fact. There is so many people that have it worse off than you.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I think, legend. He said, if you can afford a takeaway coffee today, you are one of the richest 5% in the world.
Yeah.
It's just like, just think that for a second.
Although again, by the way, because I have to acknowledge this, that is basing happiness on capitalism.
100%.
So
100%.
let's be careful.
Yeah, true. But it's just like, but if people judge their being worse off on that sort of thing, it's just like, that's a thing that everyone can work with.
Yeah.
And it's just like, there's just people that have it worse than you.
Yeah, absolutely.
So many people have it worse than you all the time. So it's about looking down, not looking up. Like, don't strive for something. Be happy with your lot and realize you have
see what
it.
you could have that's much worse.
Yeah.
Well, there's another way, slightly similar, I think, but maybe completely different. I don't know. This guy, whose name I think is Simon. I think it's Boas. I think I'm saying that right. Who's dead now? But
the person who wrote that book.
Who wrote the book? Yeah. He keeps talking about how we're all like absolute marvels as well, because the chances of any of us existing, we look around and we say there's 8 billion fucking humans in this world.
Yeah.
What an absolute nightmare. But if you think about evolution, how unlikely life is, full stop. I'm sorry, this is going to get really cosmic now, but it is true.
Ooh,
how completely unlikely life
hippie.
Was in the very first instance.
Yeah.
And then also how unlikely consciousness was, and how fucking bizarre all of that.
And we still don't even know what it fucking is.
But all of those things lead to now, this minute, right this second, not in 10 minutes time, not 3 weeks ago. This second is the only thing that we have, which again, very Buddhist, I know. But the chances of you just existing, your dad created fucking millions of sperms, your mum created millions of eggs. The chances of them meeting were already very unlikely. Then you happen to be a sperm that won an insane chances. Like a million lotteries in a row.
You're already the best sperm that was in that
You're
bunch.
the best sperm, and then you've managed to hit the best egg. Or even if it's not the best one, but it's just happens. It just so happens.
You won.
You won. And then And then the mere chances of you just existing in any way,
Yeah.
and then living to be whatever age you happen to be,
Oh, gosh,
and happening to live in, in a rich country where you can do a load of things that a lot of people can't do. And again, I don't think that we should judge this purely on capitalist measures, but obviously we're all very privileged if we live in the Western world in lots of ways. There's no reason for you to exist. Just this pure chance. So
go with
if you're annoyed about... I was in the post office queue, and it wasn't a very long queue even. I mean, that post office, the queue sometimes gets extraordinary. Goes out the door.
It is bonkers.
And but this wasn't even a big queue. It was there was 5 people in the queue. And a man appeared behind me, and there was 2 people on the checkouts, but he couldn't see one of them, so he decided there was one person on the checkout. He rang up someone, I don't know who, I think his mum, by the sounds of how he was talking, to tell her how outrageous it was that there was only one person on the till and he was going to be here for ages. And by the time he'd told his mum this over the phone, he was next in line. He was there for maybe 2 minutes or 3 minutes or something. And you would have thought that he had been kneecapped by someone. He was so outraged. And I'd obviously just read this book about dying, and I was just sort of like, my God, your inability to see this whole thing is making you so miserable. What a shit life you're leading.
Yeah.
Why? You don't have to lead a shit life like that.
But he doesn't know. And
that's got nothing to do with that's got nothing to do with being rich or poor. It's got nothing to do with... It's really... to some extent, and this is arguable, it doesn't really matter where you happen to have been born even. It's your attitude to that situation, which is the mildest, smallest possible of hardships on your life. Your attitude to that absolutely makes a difference as to whether you're going to have a good day or a bad day. And if you're that outraged by a queue in the post office, imagine if something actually happened.
Well, then, but that's about context, isn't it? And that's about thinking around it and thinking, oh, things could be worse. And it's also self-awareness. And the only way to get we live in a world where self-awareness is diminishing. The way to have self-awareness is to remember how small you are and read other people that are better than you and wiser than you, because almost everyone is. And that's, I think, the first, for me, probably was the first step in thinking about any of this. Because people were just, that's how do you create self-awareness? How do you do that? Hear other people's stories and then think about where that leads you.
I think you can get, I think I have received a lot of wisdom through music too. I think it's different. I'm not really even comparing the two, but just thinking around it. I think art generally, and I suppose culture, and probably conversations. Yeah. There's loads of different ways that you can get wisdom, I suppose. And
all of that is someone else's opinions and someone else's imagination. Yeah. It's the only way you can do it is to remember that once you become self-absorbed, you can't become self-aware in any way. And I think the only way you can become aware of yourself is to hear someone else's opinion, live in someone else's imagination, hear someone else's story, speak to people that you don't agree with, and don't make it an argument. Make it okay, cool, I just want to hear what you think. Why do you think what you think? That's why when we get in these bubbles of political agreement and the other is the enemy,
well, one thing it
doesn't go well.
Yeah, one thing you can absolutely know is that you're not going to change anybody's mind by arguing with them.
No, exactly.
So in that context, having a conversation with someone, even if they're abhorrent to you and all of their opinions are awful.
Yeah.
And I think I've learnt this through psychiatric nursing, because of course you just have, and to some extent customer service actually.
Way more.
Since not being a nurse, I've basically done various different versions of customer service, and I think it's being kind to people even if you don't agree with them is the only way. It might not change their mind, but it's the only way that you might chip away slightly. If you're a completely unreasonable person, I think about veganism a lot.
Yeah, 100%.
And it's easier to talk about veganism because it's slightly less of it's a hot topic for a lot of people, but I think you can critique it easier than you can critique a lot of social movements. But with veganism, and I think this happened. I think you can see there was a big sort of explosion in veganism. It seemed like everyone was going vegan for a while.
Yeah.
And then a bunch of voices, mostly online probably, but I mean, because we were running a vegan cafe, we saw it in person as well. But a lot of people just really doubled down and became completely like, if you know, we used to get people all the time because we were a vegan or vegetarian. We were a vegetarian cafe fundamentally, but all we did was offer milk for the coffee, pretty much. And people would come in all the time and get all uppity. There was a whole process. I mean, this is very Hastings specific, but there was all these people writing things on the floor, and there was
and
people,
VR headsets of being in an abattoir, being thrown on people's faces outside Specsavers.
There was a poor independent clothes shop that got loads of shit thrown at them because they thought that they were selling fur coats, but they weren't. They were fake fur coats, but it didn't matter. They just kept doing it. Anyway, the point is that a load of people thought, God, veganism's getting really good. This gives me the opportunity to just say whatever I want from the perspective of veganism. Well, now you see, go into any supermarket, 2 years ago, there was whole vegan aisles, because it had really taken off. One by one, all of those products are vanishing. A lot of the companies are going out of business. Because I'm not saying, and I think veganism is probably still bigger now than it was, let's say.
100%. And it's still normalised. It's there.
It's unquestionably normalised. But the point is that it looked like we were on the way to like and there was books written about this and documentaries made about this. Basically, we're almost like, the population is going to be all vegan. But the vegans were so fucking annoying that it made loads of people think, nah, fuck that. I'm gonna go and eat some cheese.
Yeah,
I just think if we had just been kind and nice, as I think we genuinely tried to be in our cafe. I mean, one of the things that a lot of people came to our cafe because we were when we opened it, we were the only vegan place in Hastings, and they would come and they would say, "Oh, I'd like to be vegan, but I don't think I can be. But I'm just trying to do it 1 or 2 days a week." I would be like, "Fuck yeah, that's amazing! You're an amazing person for doing that." Whereas a lot of vegans would be like, "Oh no, you're a killer, you're a murderer,
you're pretending, you're taking the piss."
Yeah, well, that's not gonna make anybody go, "Oh, brilliant, I want to join this group of vegans." And I'm gonna. What you need to do is just talk to them like a normal fucking person. Yeah. Prove to them, because at the time, because it was quite a long time ago, veganism was seen as weird. So just prove to them that vegans are just normal, average people
100%.
Who are nice and kind and will talk to you about things and give you advice if you want it. But if you shove it down their throat, then they're just going to run a mile. And and I think this is true about every cause that we're all bickering about now. Yeah. If you call anyone an idiot, even if they are an idiot, they're not going to come around to your way of thinking. No. They're just going to go further down their own rabbit hole 100%. And think you're a fucking dreadful person.
You end up with these polarized opinions that didn't really need to be there.
How likely are they to change your opinion to theirs?
Exactly.
0. Exactly. So how likely do you think that you are to change 100%. Their opinion?
100%.
0.
And I think we live in worlds where we're encouraged to believe that we're completely right all the time. I get caught up in this all the time. This is something I have to contemplate a lot and meditate on a lot, is my relationship to my boss. I don't want to use the words in which I want to. I can't stand him. And it's to the point where I'm just completely convinced he's a buffoon. And what I have to remind myself all the time is that no one would deliberately want to be the way that I think of him. And he could not possibly, no one in this world could possibly want to be deliberately the way in which I believe he is all the time. And a lot of my opinions about him are based in the opinion that I'm right and that he couldn't possibly be right.
I know from experience, Siobhan, that sometimes you're not right.
Yeah, I know, but this is it. And so I am willing to accept that I'm not right quite a lot of the times. But with him, I really struggle because I'm so convinced I'm right, because I'm so convinced he's wrong. And I have to fight myself on this a lot because all that's doing is making me miserable. He is swanning in and out, not even aware of this issue. I'm getting angry and miserable about it. And I have to catch myself all the time. And it is such a work in progress. We did we didn't really talk about it today at all, but we did a Buddhist meditation evening last week. And one of the main meditations you can do in Buddhism is called metta. And it's about loving kindness, and it's about thinking of people in turn and wishing them well, and part of that includes thinking of someone you would normally think poorly of. And I didn't even have to think. I went straight to him. I was like, right, I'm going to have to try. And it is my, and in that 20 minutes I really did go on a bit of a journey of like, actually, am I wrong? Am I wrong? I could easily be wrong. In fact, it could be so likely I could be wrong in all these situations. And this is something that I think we're not used to in this world right now, especially when it comes to political opinions, especially when you strongly believe that your opinion is right.
Well, your opinion is fundamentally right in the context of, like, you can say, well, this person hates one group of people and I don't hate this group of group of people, so I am right. You can say with some quantifiable, but it's not. But then it doesn't mean you're right in every respect or that they're wrong.
It's also about,
it's complex.
If you think you're right and you think someone else is wrong, like you say, screaming at them that they're wrong isn't going to make you understand their opinion. Trying to understand their opinion will be starting the way,
and it will make your life worse as well as their life worse.
Yeah, exactly. But it's just like, don't argue with a racist, find out why they're racist.
Yeah,
like they're not right, and that is a bona fide fact, but like, why do they feel this way? Ask them about their life, find out. That way you might chip away, like you say. My example here, I have a family that are really backwards in their ideas. Brother and my dad live in Norfolk.
Don't throw them under the bus, Siobhan.
No.
They're very lovely people.
They are extraordinarily lovely people. But in some conversations, I bet they come off really fucking bad. And if you were to just take that on face value and tell them they're an idiot, it's not going to work. If you speak to them, you can start understanding their point, and then you can start, going, well, this is what I think. How about this? And it's the only way. And but we need more of that.
I think also showing that you can be a whatever you are. Mm-hmm. Let's say, I mean, what was once called an alternative thinker, but that I now think and sort of hope is like a mainstream thinker, which is, but you can be happy doing that. So I'm not going to throw anyone specifically under the bus, but I have family members who held considerably worse views, I think, than anybody in your family did.
Also, I don't know
largely because of age, I think, but I'm not excusing it at all. Yeah. And I noticed I had a long period of time in my life where my relationship with that person was a fucking nightmare, and it was constant agitation. And I didn't really do this purposefully, but actually, I will say this, and I'm going to blow smoke up your ass, but it was fundamentally when I met you, and we started going, we were just people who were obviously quite alternative in our thinking, and as
especially compared to your family.
Yeah. And we had, again, I don't really want to be too specific, but we had friends that were all sorts of different things. The colour of the rainbow and the rainbow of the people.
Yeah.
I didn't know that didn't make sense, but I think you probably understand what I mean.
Yeah.
And and the thing, all I did was I stopped bickering and arguing, and actually the relationship kind of was pretty just empty for a while. And then I didn't do this deliberately, but then it just became obvious, I think, that we were leading perfectly lovely lives, being really happy, talking, and we never pretended, so we would talk about all the things that we would talk about anyway, but not in a preachy way. And I've noticed, and this is now a 10-year journey or whatever, I've noticed a real change in that person.
I think it's also a way you can do it, as well as just being happy. It's also about, I find something that is really powerful, especially with some people I know that like to get riled about things, is to just sit there and not get riled about it. Yeah. And you look like a lunatic to people who are getting really upset about things that you don't need to spend your time on. I have a group of friends that love to moan about various things, and by sitting there in silence and not engaging with it, takes a little while, but eventually everyone realises you haven't said anything, and then that conversation either dies off, or they go, what do you reckon? And you go, I just don't care about that. Yeah. And they're like, what? Like, how do you not care about it? And I just don't. Cool, good for you. Look how it's making you all miserable. Yeah. And that's instead of screaming my opinion of don't think that, I think this is better. Just sometimes not engaging.
But that's my example. And I think that's my example of like not holding a strong political opinion about something, but just being kind or
Yes.
thoughtful or
Yeah.
whatever. I think that's why it's like it's also effective.
It is.
So yes, you would probably, if I came out and said I've given up politics, I'm no longer an anti-racist, I'm just kind, I'm no longer an anti-sexist, I'm like that thing that I just said. If I came out and said that, most people would be up in arms. But the reality is that by being that, I would probably be being way more effective as an anti-racist, as an anti-sexist, because I would just be showing my opinions through example and not pissing anybody off and not pushing anybody away.
Yeah.
But of course, you would be considered probably an absolute like heathen, I imagine. And maybe, and again, I've not fully explored the idea in my own brain. So
no, this is the beginning of the exploration, guys.
I'm just saying that as a kind of vague concept or as a vague idea of like, yeah, you could be more effective. You could be more effective by just being nice to people, no matter who they are. In a political context, by giving up politics, you could be way more effective in a political context. That's what I'm trying to say.
Boom.
I think.
Mic drop.
Well, I think we need to drop the mic because this has gone on for a very long time.
Very long time.
So we're gonna wrap it up.
Yeah.
If you want to send us an email, you can. shamcityroasters@gmail.com. We are now called the Sohbet Punx Podcast. Please tell your friends; they might be able to find us. And
it already is our Instagram handle if you're into that.
It is, and it will soon be our everything handle.
Is that what you call it, a handle?
I don't know. You just called it that, so
well, maybe
you're
it's
the
right.
most techie person I know.
I'm so tech. I'm going to get on my cross stitch again in a minute. So that's how tech I am.
This podcast comes out every 2 weeks, every other Thursday. So we will see you in 2 weeks' time, where we will probably continue this discussion or some sort of version of this discussion.
Yeah.
And we love you all.
Have a lovely week. A couple of weeks. Bye.
Bye.